Hello, and welcome back to another special episode of Brigador, where we are going to read the last of the acquisitions, or work our way through them, on the equipment. Since we've read everything else at this point, we might as well read these too. We're going to start off with the specials. The Smoke Projector. A pre-colonial tool for an ancient combat technique, the Smoke Projector fires in rapid succession 10 smoke canisters across a broad line to immediately disperse smoke screens on impact. Useful in establishing a firing line or breaking contact, as current variants include particulates to obscure both visual and infrared spectra. Emp Grenade. Launches a small yield EMP warhead at low velocity in a high arc. Detonation temporarily disables shielding and drive mechanisms of all vehicles in the blast zone. Anti-grav units with overloaded drives are known to plummet into the ground and nearby friendlies, and radio communications are also rendered inert for a duration. Particularly effective when used in tandem with artillery or high hull impact munitions. Active Camouflage. A combination of phased array optics and vibration dampening renders a vehicle effectively invisible. However, given the massive energy requirements and sensitivity of the system, the field can only be maintained for a few seconds at a time, and is disrupted by weapons fire or heavy impacts. As the effect is not perfect, close proximity will also reveal the stealth vehicle. Audiokinetic Pulse. Generates a cone-shaped shockwave centered on the unit that ranges up to 80 feet before dissipating. Any targets within the blast zone can experience overpressure in excess of 70 kilopascals, known to cause building collapse and involuntary dismemberment, as opposed to voluntary dismemberment. The AKP must not be fired against structures rated beyond this threshold. Solo Nobre district walls, for example, as the shockwave will rebound against the emitter, often killing the operator. Didn't know that. It should also be noted that while developed and legally used for domestic demolition, usage of this device in combat is considered a war crime by most planetary governments. Alright, small weapons. Recoilless rifle, 84mm Sabo? I think it's Sabo. Carlos. The Carlos is the bread and butter of any infantry or power suit division. A rear shot from a Carlos hits almost as hard as an Abbott, provided you can catch a mech with its shields down. It's what keeps infantry and power suits relevant in combat with much heavier mechanized units. Just as the crack of hard shields breaking can be heard, a volley of Carlos rounds will be sailing towards the exposed vehicle. Recoilless rifle, 84mm SFI, Donkey. Recoilless rifle, vehicular mount, 84mm short fusion implosion rounds, aka the Donkey. You don't see these equipped too often, as a Donkey is just as liable to kill you as the enemy. It's very corvid that way. The thing hits like a meteor though, provided you can get close enough. MOG drivers use them for termite raids on the Corvids to collapse their tunnels. But the real cowboys are the troubadour and pantry boy drivers who use the cannon like a jousting lance against heavies. I've even seen some of the bigger mechs equipping a Donkey over a Pinch or a Carlos. Over a Pinch or a Carlos, if they know they're in for some knife fighting. It's a big step in damage for the mount size if you don't mind the loss of range or rupturing your eardrums. Machine gun, 8mm FMJ, Bonesaw. I can't recall the Bonesaw's original appellation, but I know it was some reference to the old regime, which is why they changed it. The new moniker came from a single battle during the Troubles. Great Leader ambushed an under-equipped infantry division in transit through Linschoten. His attacking force comprised mostly of power suits equipped with the MGs. As you know, Linschoten is mostly farmland, plenty of concealment, but no cover for miles around. So when the wall of Mogs emerged from those cornfields, the infantry had nowhere to go. Most were shot before they could hit the dirt. and within minutes, over 8,000 infantry had been cut down by the bone saw. Machine gun, 15 millimeter ESD. Lockdown. This weapon shouldn't exist, but I've seen footage of one melting hard shields like a hot knife in soy butter. There's some kind of feedback effect from impact too, because power generators will crap themselves even if the emitters are still pushing ozone. Forget the big spacer fireworks. Guns like the Atomo or the Harvester and those big dumb Z primes. Those are all for show. When spacers really want you dead, they just quietly drop in one of their kill squads. Power suits decked in camo fields, lockdowns, and black hands. Those guns are quiet. Those suits are quiet. And pretty soon their targets are quiet too. Mortar, 107mm fragmentation, Faker. It's your standard heavy infantry mortar. Versatile with fragmentation rounds that can deal solid damage against both shielding and hull plating without being overly concerned about collateral damage. I mean, don't drop one of these on a habitation block and expect everything to be fine, but it's not going to shatter glass 5 blocks away either, unlike the Bilal. Rocket, 100mm chaff, Pinch. I believe this to be one of the finest weapons a colonial military has ever produced. Unfortunately, it lacks the glamour of a Zeus or Koenig, and as such has never seen battalion-level production runs. Yes, the rockets are shockingly expensive for their size, and yes, there is a high incidence of misfires due to gunnery crews not maintaining proper engagement distance. But a force properly equipped with pinch rockets could level the playing field when fighting against spacers. One well-placed pinch can reduce a broodmare's shields to the point where our own heavies might contest it. Additionally, the launcher is man-portable and would be devastating against clustered formations and supply convoys. Spacer metallurgy may surpass our own, but they must deal with mass constraints far more severe, and as such, our armor strengths are roughly equivalent. If the NEP ever comes to its senses and greenlights a full production run of this weapon, then I believe we would have a reasonable chance against the admittedly unlikely but very real possibility of a full-scale spacer invasion. Laser, 4 Megawatt Acoustic, Trembler. Technically, this thing is a tool for mining and excavation. Vibrates rock and most construction materials so hard they turn to powder. Hard shields laugh it off though, and most metals will just make funny sounds, so the Trembler wasn't adapted for military use until the NEP needed something special for dynamic urban restructuring, aka mouseholing. When the food riots hit their peak, you'd see MOG teams bursting out the sides of buildings, clad with tremblers and hydraulic claws for dealing with rebar. The powdered concrete would cling to the MOGs and give them a sickly white look, hence the Gurika nickname. Had people living in those dense habitation blocks real spooked, especially since more than one Gurika team caused a building to collapse. Irradiator, 8 Megawatt discharge, Black Hand. The Black Hand is a gamma emitter, used almost exclusively by spacers. Fielding the weapon alone is sufficient for war crimes charges, but the few militaries with means to pursue action against the spacers are also the ones who employ them. Against an unshielded target, single ignitions can inflict third-degree burns at a guarantee of cancer at 100 yards, and within 50, you begin to see fourth-degree burns and spontaneous contracture. Exposure at 25 yards is a death sentence, even when protected behind several inches of armor plating. Liquefaction of the dermis and internal organs is common, and even if a target somehow survives exposure at that range, they are permanently incapacitated. Given the efficacy of hard shields against gamma emitters, I'm convinced the widespread deployment of this weapon by spacers serves a more psychological than directly combat-related role. The sound of its hissing crackle is enough to panic even seasoned soldiers, and from what I've seen of spacers in combat, particularly amongst their light mech spears, I suspect this weapon is also used as a form of counting coup. Regardless, I've seen the aftermath of its use firsthand. It is a cruel and terrible weapon. Just a side note, because this is an interesting reference. If you're not familiar with the term counting coup, I want to say it's it's a term that comes from Native American tribes. I think specifically the Lakota, but don't quote me on that. Counting coup in battle was a practice they had for bragging rights, where if you were in combat and could hit the enemies with something, not with the intention to wound them, but with just the intention to say, I'm so good, I can run circles around you and just hit you with a stick or something like that. That it was sort of a way of not only is it like a psychological warfare tactic, but also internally within their tribes, it would be a source of an indicator of skill, basically. So it's an interesting term. Autocannon, 37mm HE Confessor. You'd think, given the modest caliber, that the Confessor would be a one-and-done design, but this thing's gone through more revisions and tweaks than some Lorentz Force weapons. It lives in this weird acquisitions limbo, where performance isn't so bad to merit the cost of a new design, but each iteration seems to cause many more problems as it solves. They're on the Mark, what is that, Mark 17, 18. They're on the Mark 18, last I'd heard. Might be an embezzlement scheme for some army bigwig, but with how genuinely pissed those design bureau types are about it, might not be. Seriously, if you need a good chuckle and want to see a bureau boy have a seizure, just ask when the Confessor's gonna be done. Cannon, 76mm canister, Parliament. It's a shotgun. Machine gun, 12.7mm AP. My Dios. I don't speak Portuguese. I'm really bad at this. Dois, I think. My understanding is that this weapon not only predates the colonies, but space travel entirely. If that is the case, then it's a truly venerable design, and one I'm told will continue to serve for the foreseeable future. Chain gun, 20mm Beehive, Crambo. Early specifications called for non-lethal crowd control in a shotgun format, and the first Crambos rolled out right as one of the largest food riots in Nobrian history began. Though initially effective, non-lethal tactics can only slow district-sized mobs, and as NEP police forbade riot suppression task forces from equipping any lethal munitions, army casualties soon mounted. Once word had spread of soldier deaths, district garrisons stopped being so keen on the non-lethal aspect. In what became known as the Lannoy Special, maintenance crews began swapping out the Crambo shell's rubber beads for metal ones off ball bearings. When the army officially condemned the practice as the riots grew worse, an official variant carrying large flechette payloads was soon put into production. We've all seen the pictures of what those shells do to crowds. Gatling Mortar, 50mm HE, Scimitar. The procurement specifications called for readily portable artillery that could precision fire munitions at multiple targets over a single volley, along with a feed system capable of outputting 300 rounds per minute. In response to the Design Bureau's first draft for the weapon, the Design Bureau's first draft for the weapon included a suite of radio gear, a Bonesaw MG pintle mounted to the artillery barrel, an umbrella, an espresso machine, and a dispenser for prophylactics. Army brass were not amused. Though the Scimitar project is officially considered a failure, this curious weapon was still produced in volume and has found a home with NEP and artillery battalions and support vehicles alike. Skilled gunners can streak the ordnance along a line in a fashion that resembles a small bombing run. Footnote: Some higher-ups got the joke, as the Design Bureau received several espresso machines upon completion of the Scimitar's first production run. You can still find them, overused and scattered about the building. Howitzer, 160mm smoothbore, gutterball. If you imagine a catapult throwing a bowling ball, then you've got the right idea. Corvids melt down the heaviest metals they can find into solid shot, sometimes for proper shells, sometimes hand-packing explosives separately, like a medieval cannoneer. The implementation may be crude, but you can't argue with the devastation gutterball crews have wreaked upon Solo Nobre. I've personally witnessed a gutterball round pass through 4 buildings before shattering against the district walls. Laser, 7 Megawatt disruption, Disco. Moderate dispersion and disabling impact make the Disco an effective crowd control weapon and an excellent counter to darting assault vehicles. It's one of the oldest lasers currently in service, developed by and for spacers until a corporation science team managed to reverse engineer the thing. It's why you find Discos in just about any colonial military, and why I suspect the Vortung's research station had a mysterious reactor meltdown soon after the breakthrough. Laser, 6 Megawatt, kinetic, bully. What do you mean kinetic laser? Anyway. This aptly named weapon has an unsavory reputation among the Novo Solo citizenry for destroying housing and infrastructure more often than actual combatants. In truth, the bully was designed specifically for this purpose, and only saw combat deployment when it was shown to be just as effective against vehicles. Strobing 6-beam bursts both heat and kick on impact, a combination lethal to structures and unshielded vehicles alike. Bully fire leaves a very distinctive bubbly slag that's recognizable long after the fact, which explains why it's a favorite with PsyOps. Okay. Well, I might burn out my voice finishing these off, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it for you. I'm going to cut the episode here, and on the next episode, we'll finish these off. Thank you guys for watching.